Welcome to Launch Code, a premier business podcast, starring Evan Hafer, Matt Best, and Jared Taylor.
All right, well, welcome to another episode of Launch Code Podcast. I'm here with Tom Davin. This is your third episode, Tom.
And I'm happy to be back on the inside now, Evan.
Yeah, you know, I heard you got a new job.
I did.
You did?
I took a couple months off, and
Yep.
my wife got tired of me being around the house, and I said, time to get back in the game. So I called you and said, you got anything for me?
It's not exactly how that went, but I begged Tom. I said, Tom, I am drowning in quicksand over here at BRCC. Would you come and help me? And you said yes. So Tom Davin, co-CEO of Black Rifle Coffee. That's a big deal for us. More than anything, I think it's a great deal for us. It's a lot of fucking work for you.
And what the hell's a co-CEO? No one knows.
I don't know. I think, does anybody know? I mean, I'm asking you that. I mean, have you heard of it? You've heard of it before,
Yes.
but
Happens all the time in multi-billion-dollar companies.
Right.
So we are destined to be a much bigger company.
I felt that it was important. Just like, I didn't care. You know, I think we talked about it quite a bit.
Right.
Where we were like, we don't care, to be honest with you. You said the same thing.
Right.
Like, I don't care. Both of us
Titles really
care.
don't matter.
Doesn't matter. It's like divide and conquer. You're going to be way better at a lot of things than I am. I might be better at maybe one thing than you are. Maybe like one thing, like walking my dog or something.
I don't know. You're a lot
No.
better at coffee, a lot better
All right.
at social media. So there's at least
There it
two.
is. Yeah, there's two things. So you left 511 after how many years?
I was there 8 years.
Wow.
2010, started as chairman of the board, became CEO in 11.
Mm-hmm.
Lasted through September of 2018. It really came time for Francisco Morales, who had been there since about 2000, really
Wow.
one of the founders of the company.
Yeah.
He was president, ran international and all product development. Francisco was ready to take on more, and I said, I'm giving you the baton.
So there really wasn't much of a transition even needed, because he'd been with the company for what? My math's right, 18 years.
Right, exactly.
Right.
Worked on every single product, knew everybody. He just didn't realize what it was like to have to deal with the board and investors. So
Got it.
I doubled his workday.
Right. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. That's interesting. And what would you say some of the best, and I guess really when you look back at the legacy or your legacy and what type of impact that you had on 511, what would you say were the big things that will define your career over there?
I think from the outside looking in at 511, people have seen that we took what was basically a really good law enforcement brand with what people like Andy Stumpf, when I'd push him, would say the shoot me first pants.
Right.
The original 511 tactical cargo pants with that big, obvious cargo pocket that would suggest either you're FBI or a wannabe. We took that brand and really made it much more of a consumer, outdoor-facing brand, now with 50 retail stores. So that's the most visible change. I would say when you get under the hood, it really would fall into the categories of a real focus on a mission and culture, and then innovation paired with execution. So mission really is all about, why do people get up every morning and come to work at 511? Why does that matter?
Right.
And we really set a mission around being innovators who create purpose-built gear for the most demanding environments, and tried to rally everybody, whether they worked in the warehouse, accounting, or, of course, product development, to get behind that mission. And then a culture of really personal development and looking at life as an adventure. Happens that 511's part of that life adventure. Whether it's coming in early, going to the CrossFit box at 511, or hiking, or climbing a mountain with a bunch of friends, or running a 24-hour marathon with a bunch of folks in Europe like Einar Kronstad would do with his people. So really turning that whole culture into something that was about, hey, we're really part of this club, we're doing something special, and we're happy to be here.
Was there a definitive 511 culture built around mission when you got over there?
I would say yes, but it was really the imputed mission from the founder, Dan Costa. So Dan was an enormously talented guy that bought the company Royal Robbins from Royal, created 511 by spinning out the 511 product line worn by the FBI in 2003. But really, even up through 2011 when I took over, it was a culture of what does Dan want?
Oh, yeah.
Which is always a challenge for founders, Evan.
Yeah.
And that, Dan would say student body left, everybody goes student body left.
Right.
And I really tried to turn it more into, it's important that people know what the CEO of the founder wants, but really, why are we here? We're here to serve a community. We're here to serve end users. We're here to make a great product that crushes the needs of that community.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because I see that in the company.
Yeah.
Unintentionally, it happens all the time, even for me, that notices it's an issue, and it's not an exercise in ego in order to do it. But it happens just based on, I don't exactly know why, or the psychology behind what is it I want. I think maybe early on, because it's driven so much from, or was driven so much from me, in the sense of, like, you're just sitting around a table with a handful of other people, and my whole thing early on was I would just have to tell them what to do, because I didn't have time to get into, an esoteric maneuvering through motivation. And when I say that, it's like, I just need you to do these 12 things, and let's just fucking get it done. And then come back, make sure that they were following in on work. And I think that's probably 4.5 years now. Like, just getting myself out of that habit too is very, very difficult. So I can imagine. I mean, you've worked with, I don't know how many founders now. How many founders have you worked with?
5. Very closely. Going back to Jim Gennard, founder of Oakley, Peggy and Andrew Churn, Tom Campion, Dan Costa, and now Evan Hafer.
Right.
I think that's 5, or maybe 6 if there are 2 from Panda.
Right. What are the challenges in that? Like, there has to be a significant amount of challenges with that.
Well, founders are particularly expert at knowing what customers want and literally battling the entire organization to do what's best for the customer and user. And they're great at innovating products to serve those end users. Typically not the best at any kind of process or putting structure in place to, say, delegate authority and get other people to just take the commander's intent and run with it.
Right.
So what I like to say is, working with a founder, one can't try and win the argument. Now, you're married, so I think anybody who's married understands you can try and win the argument in the moment. Probably not going to work out too well.
Right.
I'm a team player. I just love to be on a winning team, and I'm not the guy to start a company, but I think I'm a guy to really help scale the company. So I really like being around super creative founders who are customer-driven and visionary, and then I help build the infrastructure to scale the business. I think that's what I'm great at. I've been around early-stage startups. It's not really my MO. I think I'm best at taking things from the initial stages to much bigger.
So where would you classify this company? Because we're past startup, right?
Right.
So we're right there, kind of. We're below, though, the threshold, I think, where you had worked other projects with other founders. Because where was Panda when you came in?
Panda was about $600 million when I got there. Oakley was about $700 million. Had gone into apparel and wasn't making any money on anything outside of sunglasses.
Wow.
So when I joined Oakley as a director on the board, they had added a couple $100 million of apparel, footwear, and accessory sales on top of all the eyewear sales. Made no incremental profit on all of that, what they called AFA, apparel, footwear, accessories.
Right.
So that was a break-even business. So it was a disaster that had to be addressed.
Well, how did you address it? Did you just start chopping away the apparel line? Because I don't see as much as they had.
Right. In that case, the issue was Jim Gennard, founder, was trying to be CEO of a $700 million company. It was publicly traded. Biggest customer was Luxottica through Sunglass Hut.
Right.
They had all sorts of issues around anytime Sunglass Hut wanted to yank Oakley's chain, Oakley being public at the time, they'd say, we're not going to order any more product. It's mid-February and we're full up for Q1, which would just decimate Oakley's first quarter earnings. So Oakley kept getting slapped around by Lux, and that's why Jim wanted to diversify, get into other categories that weren't sold in Sunglass Hut. The problem was, while they knew what the customer wanted, they didn't know how to make apparel and footwear.
Right.
So my solution, again, being a director, not really being inside of the company, was to explain to Jim Gennard, Jim, you should not be the CEO. And he was not real happy to hear that message. And he said, why don't you be CEO? And I said, well, I'm a restaurant guy running Panda Express, so timing's not great. Let's find somebody who knows what they're doing. We brought in Scott Olivet, who had just left Nike, and Scott was just incredible. So Scott had a deep apparel and footwear background, jumped in. He partnered with Jim, really got the business turned around in a very short period of time. So in that case, it was convincing the founder not to be in an operating role, but to be the visionary.
Got it.
Again, very different when a company gets to $700 million in revenue.
Right.
Bring in somebody who's more the operational leader, like Scott, to run the business.
Got it. So how do you compartmentalize that in the sense of, in his case, massive company, he had been involved from, he's the founder.
Right.
So how do you convince that guy that that's the right decision?
Well, that was an interesting dynamic because the board of directors had kind of coalesced with Jim around this idea of, okay, we've got a problem with AFA, apparel, footwear, accessories. We need consultants to come help us figure it out. So I would say maybe a little overstatement, but the rest of the board and Jim had agreed to bring in somebody like a McKinsey or Bain to do a big study. And I said, guys, I don't think strategy is the problem here. I think it's a leadership problem. And I turned to Jim and said, boss, I think you're the problem. What the hell? Yeah, you're the problem. You are unable to delegate. You're unable to get out of the weeds. You need to be visionary. You need to work on sunglasses and let somebody else get in here and figure this out. So after a few shouting matches and gnashing of teeth and other board members saying, I'm not so sure about that, ultimately, we coalesced around the strategy to bring in an outside CEO. And then Jim really did enjoy, because he trusted Scott, he enjoyed being the visionary working on eyewear.
And then how long, because he sold Oakley, right? Or they sold?
Yes, so he ended up really thinking about what he wanted to do with his life.
Right.
It was a public company. He was the controlling shareholder. He really wanted to go spend his time on Red Camera. And about that time, Luxottica, again, the main competitor and customer, came along, knocked on the door and said, why don't we buy you? So even though Jim knew there was a risk to the Oakley culture, he said, I think it's time for a change. And the company was sold. That was 2007.
Okay. And now he started Red, right? Or he had already started Red.
He started that kind of as a side deal when he was at Oakley.
Got it.
And that's a multi-$100 million, just groundbreaking digital camera company. And now he just started a phone company called the Red Hydrogen.
Right.
He calls it a media machine that happens to have a phone on it.
Okay.
So he's got a bunch of former Oakley guys like Tommy Rios in there running that business.
When can you get one of those?
I think they're about to go on sale. I might know somebody.
You might know somebody.
Got full 4K resolution and what they call a 3D ability to shoot without a second camera lens, which is quite remarkable.
Yeah, that's crazy. So Andrew, you've talked a lot about him just in private conversations. I've never heard anything negative whatsoever in any capacity. But was it an interesting experience working for Andrew for as many years?
Andrew Churn, yes. So Andrew and his wife, Peggy, founded Panda first as a full-service restaurant in Pasadena in the 70s, Panda Express in the 80s, based on taking kind of Chinese dining and making more of a fast food or fast casual model. But Andrew is a hard-charging restaurateur who loves to be out interacting with people. Again, very customer-focused. Very focused on no waste. I think I've told you some of the stories about not allowing team members to leave napkins or sauces out.
Right.
Literally, customers have to ask for the napkins or sauce, even though the engineering studies would tell you you'd save a lot of money if you put them in dispensers. Panda Express, that was a no-go for Andrew.
I like that. I like I like the stories that you've told me about Andrew for a combination of reasons, because he's very frugal from what it sounds like. It's a fly cheap, stay cheap. And then
eat like a king.
Eat like a king.
Now, in Andrew's case, that means go to a Panda restaurant and cook yourself a meal fit for a king.
Right. Well, and I like that because we discussing business and people. Andrew's a billionaire, I would imagine, right?
Probably a multi-billionaire.
Multi-billionaire.
Yeah.
But even with a very successful company, he was still watching how much he was spending in travel and how much he was spending in hotels.
Totally.
Right.
I think he would say, never mentioned this to me, but if you pressed him, that he would believe if he lost that edge of frugality, he might lose touch with the business. So when we traveled, we would stay in Hampton Inns or some other low-price $100 a night hotel and share rooms. And when Andrew, the billionaire founder of the company, shares rooms, no one complains.
Right. Which I can definitely empathize with that position.
Yeah.
Like I can't empathize necessarily with the multi-billion-dollar revenue, but even as the company has become more successful, I think there is even a natural flexion point at times. Even a company to say, "Well, I can splurge," or whatever it might be, and sure, let's take a first class flight or whatever that is. And I did that one time.
Right.
And
you probably felt horrible.
I felt horrible.
Right.
I felt horrible, and I literally changed the policy. From that point, I changed the policy from that point on. I was like, I don't need first class, and if I do, then I'll pay for it on my own.
Right.
Yeah, I don't need an upgrade. And I never wanted to be in the position where, my travel policy was different than somebody else who was traveling for the company. I don't like that. I don't like that feeling whatsoever.
Well, I think we get that from our military backgrounds. I mean, you travel on the same cargo plane and the same uncomfortable, crappy strap seat on the C-141 or 130 as everybody else does. So why would you ever fly first class?
I don't know. I wouldn't do it. I mean, I wouldn't do it now, even if I'm traveling with my family or whatever it is. It seems like a waste to me. But I think even for a lot of veteran entrepreneurs that I see, peer group and below, they get incremental, what they would say is definable economic success, which is they start selling more or becoming more successful. And I think it's a natural tendency for a person that hasn't really made definably hasn't made a lot of money in their past to go and start spending it. And that's like we saw it in the military all the time. The private would come in and he's 18 years old, he'd get out and he'd go and take out a loan for a new car that was like 20% interest, or whatever it is, and
he's going to sit there in the parking lot while he's deployed all the time. Right.
And they'll give you a loan. Right. I think it's the same thing with a lot of younger businessmen businessmen or women, as they start to become a little bit more successful, they think about upgrading and doing a few other things. And, you've been at very successful big companies. And I think that it's interesting from your perspective to see, what their policies and their expenses looked like as far as, was there a lot of waste going on within like the executive culture as far as their expenses in any of these companies that you've been in?
I think there was, if you go back to the PepsiCo days and early days at Taco Bell, once you got to be a vice president, or in my case, chief operating officer of Taco Bell, you got a lot of bennies around first class business travel, past kind of a 2.5 hour flight, nicer hotels, big fancy office, which is great in the way of creature comforts, but as a leader, I never felt that sent a great signal. And I think even those days have changed. I think if you went to Taco Bell today, they're much more frugal than they used to be 20 years ago.
Right.
But a lot of it just is the leadership shadow you cast on the organization. And back to Andrew Churn, Andrew did that well as somebody who looked out for the customer, cared about the food, was kind of a fanatic about food quality in the restaurants. He was also a fanatic about personal development. So he was.
Yeah, what was the system that he used? The personal or leadership development system, like Mark or?
He was really big on Life Academy.
Oh, okay.
Which was a kind of Chinese philosophy program that I went through and a number of went through. Now I think he's sending people to Landmark.
Yeah.
And the point is not so much whether those programs are the best for a particular organization, but Andrew always felt whoever you are today, you can be better emotionally, physically, mentally, and it's the role of the leadership and the role of the company to help you become a better person. Now, every once in a while, you'd lean in on somebody and say, you could be a lot better, and they'd take it the wrong way, like, what's wrong with me?
Right.
The billionaire founder is telling me I'm not good enough. It's like, no, he just wants you to be a better person today versus tomorrow, tomorrow versus today. And I think that's something I believe we all want to do here at Black Rifle Coffee.
Right.
How do we help people use the journey of being part of this company to grow as an individual, become a better person, better leader, have a more meaningful day at the office, week at the office, and be part of a mission?
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's interesting because the difference between leadership and management is like, and I think we've even talked about it on the show a little bit, where when you look and you've been in the company now on the board, and then now you've been kind of in the bowels, so to speak, in the last couple months, when we look about implementing policy and the difference between management and leadership, how do you see being able to improve the leadership system within Black Rifle Coffee?
Well, I think another way to look at it would be to say you can motivate people, which comes from the Latin root word around moto, which is kind of an external force.
Right.
And leadership to me is much more about inspiring individuals to be their best in the service of a mission. So everything we do here has to be in the context of why do we exist? How are we serving our end user community? How are we building the brand of Black Rifle Coffee to serve those who love coffee, love America, love what we stand for? And that means even something as basic as a travel policy like you and I were looking at yesterday. If it's 10 pages of fine print that doesn't connect anything and looks like it's a cut and paste from some massive corporation, then I'm falling down as a leader.
Right.
I should be able to net it out and say, Commander's intent is what we talked about: fly cheap, stay cheap, eat well. Here's some rough guidelines. Any questions, ask your leader.
Right.
And have people understand this is how you run a business. The purpose of this is making sure we don't waste money on things that don't help the end user. And let's get back to business. Let's not spend money on policies.
Yeah, that's interesting because I see it as like, and I think you do too, any dollar that we spend outside of creating an additional layer of experience for the customer or creating value for the customer is a value we've taken away basically from the customer and then a future customer,
right?
The possibility. So if we spend in excess of a couple $100 a year in travel, it's still $200, $300, $400, $500 that we could spend on creating a better customer experience, which will overall will increase the lifetime of that customer and their interaction with the brand. How do you translate that in a company? To get everybody focused and honed in on really providing value for the customer.
I think it's complicated because as the company grows and you have more policies that people need to understand, because bigger companies need process and discipline to make sure they always understand the reason why.
Right. People
have to understand, why are we doing this? Why do we have a policy or a process around how to use your credit card, how to file an expense report? And we don't want that to feel heavy. We want to pass the kind of common sense test around the reason we control spending, so we can spend more to acquire more customers, serve them better, give them better value. That creates more jobs for everybody, more opportunities to grow, and ultimately more value for the company. It's the long way around, but it's the only way to create long-term value.
Mm-hmm. What do you want to do? What do you want to do while you're here? Like, what are the big things that you've kind of put in your basket to kind of take out?
Well, I think you and I have chatted about when I first met you almost 2 years ago. Based on my notes, you had 22,000 subscribers, and we finished the year, I think it's safe to say, at roughly 75,000 subscribers at the end of 2018. And we'll grow that number aggressively this year. But I think when we get into the millions of subscribers to the Black Rifle Coffee Club, then we're really starting to impact a lot of people.
Right.
It's a heck of a value proposition. Free shipping, discount on your coffee, discount from other partner vendors in the universe. It's incredible.
Right.
And it seems to me we ought to have millions of subscribers. So being part of creating a big legacy in the millions of subscribers and rallying the team internally to do that, that gets me turned on.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's interesting because and Tom and I have talked about this a lot, where the way that I envision it is this overall value proposition to the customer that is undeniably something they need in their life. Like it's
Right.
undeniably. Like I have the opportunity to take my subscription that I'm going to drink anyway.
Right.
And
But
turn
you'd have
that
to
in.
buy it somewhere and
Yeah.
take it home. We're going to drop it off right at your house.
We're going to drop it off at your house from a company that you know and love. And you're going to be able to turn your coffee into the discounts for the things that you also love.
Right.
And for me, when I originally looked at that, it was just creating something that didn't exist for me and people like me. That's all
Right.
it was.
Sure.
But then as I started looking at it, and even 5 years ago when I thought about it, when I remember roasting coffee in my garage, thinking, man, if this only existed, because I drink a lot of coffee.
Right.
I'm a coffee head, and I roast coffee and I drink coffee, and I wanted to be able to buy coffee and then not only
Sure.
support the things that I supported, but then also be able to have these partnered relationships and be able to log in and
Right.
buy ammo online. Like that was quite literally that was one of the only things I really envisioned was, man, if I could like drink coffee and pay for my ammo habit at the same time, how do
Right.
I get all these things done? Right. So
You're probably trying to trade coffee for ammo.
I did a lot, actually.
Exactly.
I did that a lot.
That's the best deal.
Yeah, because I would roast coffee and be able to brick it out and then give it to people, and they would say, "That's great," and I'll give you. I remember early on. This is kind of a ridiculous story, but I remember trading coffee for something like 20,000 rounds of 5.56 Tracer,
Yeah.
and
It's a hell of a deal.
it was a great deal. It was like, oh, okay, well, and we did, kind of the math in our heads, and he was like, well, I figure you're going to owe me this much coffee, and I was like, yeah, that sounds good. I got a bunch
Sure.
of Tracer. Let's trade it out. And
Did you have that pallet delivered to your house?
yeah, I did actually. So I used to have to go down and pick up because at first I couldn't get pallets delivered to the house because I hadn't figured that piece out yet.
Right.
So I'd have to drive down to the freight center and then back my truck up and offload the pallet onto the back of my truck. And it's a couple 1,000 pounds
Oh, yeah.
typically. So my truck would be tipped in one direction, be driving down the interstate,
Sure.
going home to my roaster with a pallet of coffee that's like, 2,000 pounds, and looking at it going, man, how the fuck am I going to roast all this coffee? Eventually I figured it out. Obviously I could get pallets dropped off at the
Yeah.
house, and all you had to do is request lift gate, basically.
sure.
You just have, and it costs you
Right.
$50, $100 or whatever it is to get a lift gate. But initially it was kind of a rough start with me delivering pallets. But starting the company and starting it with the subscription, knowing that that's always been my intent, I think for me, that's probably the biggest point of excitement for me, and to have you here is to be less operationally focused and more focused on creating that
Right.
best in class experience for the coffee subscription. Like that's a project that
Yeah.
I've literally not been able to take on to its full tenacity
Sure.
for 4 years. When I say that, I'm very proud of it, but I don't even think it's close to where it needs to
Right.
be.
It can always be better.
Right. Yeah.
But I think back to one of my goals here, in addition to driving that whole subscription side of the business to serve the community, is helping the people inside the company as we grow feel like they're part of a grand adventure.
Right.
Capturing and building on that spirit that you had with a handful of people around the kitchen table and 14 or 15, there's really no reason why we can't maintain and even nurture that as we grow. But it has to be deliberate. It doesn't happen on its own. Kind of the thermodynamic law of entropy, that comes into play as you get bigger and people are spread around the country. It's harder to have people feel connected.
Well, I think it's harder too. It's gotten a lot more complex over the last 4 years. And I think that for me, one of the big things is being able to translate that into the company effectively on a regular basis. And, I think a lot of it has to do with just fatigue, right? Where it's like,
Right.
All right, man. Or one of the things I used to detest in the military were commander speeches. Like I just hated them for whatever reason. I think every other Joe hated them most of the time. But if you got a very authentic commander or first sergeant that was like digging in with you, that's how I've always really respected leadership, and the way that was like, I'm shoulder to shoulder with you in this endeavor.
Right.
I'm not sitting in an ivory tower throwing orders over the wall so you guys can go implement shit that I don't understand. Right.
Right. Yeah, and everybody hates speeches, everybody hates PowerPoints, everybody hates another email, but people generally find stories engaging.
Right.
Yeah, particularly if they're legit, grounded in reality. Just like last week, I was in Manchester, Tennessee, where we roast a lot of our coffee, and I met with Amanda Higgins, our general manager, Chris Johnson, and some of the other people, and even folks bagging coffee. When they took a break to come off the floor, they had stories to tell about Black Rifle.
Right.
They're just so fired up to be part of the company, talk about where we're going and how we're going to add a second shift. I walked out of there more pumped up having met them than they probably were pumped up to meet me, and that's the way we want it every day around here.
I love that. I love Manchester, like, for a lot of different reasons, but it's funny because Amanda, she's done such a great job out there for a lot of different reasons. I love the transitioning veteran that didn't know business necessarily before they got here, and so they're in startup mode.
Sure. Fighter pilot, no less.
Yeah, fighter pilot.
Hard to get real work out of fighter pilots.
Exactly. But she's been in startup mode herself. She's had to build this plant and work with my dad out there and work through all the issues that building a business inside a business essentially. And it's it's super fun to watch somebody go through kind of the same thing that you went through, but on a different within the company. And that's one of the things that I really love about the company, because what I like doing to people, whether it's right or wrong, is I like handing them really complex problems and just saying, go figure it out.
Sure.
Come back to me when you get stuck. But chances are I might not even know what the hell you're talking about when you come back to me.
Yeah.
So, but you're going to figure it out because I trust you. And if you don't figure it out, then I'll just trust the fact that you'll be really open with the fact that you're going to need to bring somebody else in to figure out how we work through this.
Sure. Yeah, and it's not a one-way street. Your expectation, if somebody gets stuck on that mission, they'll come back and say, I'm stuck, I need help.
Yeah, because I can't tell you how many times in this company I didn't know what it was that I was trying to do.
Right.
So then you have to dig in. You have to figure out, where do I find this information?
Right.
How do I learn about this? And then I'd start picking up the phone and calling guys like you or somebody else, asking them, like, who do you know over here in this, and what do you do? What do you do in this circumstance? Or like building a T-shirt printing factory or or manufacturing process within Black Rifle, or roasting.
Right.
At that scale, there's nobody that was even roasting coffee at that scale in Salt Lake City. And then other coffee roasters in the valley that we knew told me I was fucking crazy and that I couldn't do it.
Don't even bother.
They told me that I couldn't do it. Straight up. They're like, you guys will never be roasting coffee. There's no way you're going to be roasting that much coffee.
Right.
There's no way you're going to be able to build that.
The wheels
in
are
Salt
coming
Lake.
off. Yeah.
And I was like, you know what, man? I think that we're going to be able to do this.
Right.
You know, if we can build a fire base in the middle of nowhere,
Sure.
you know, lay in complex fields of fire and figure out how to go fucking kill people efficiently.
Right.
I can put in a roaster, you know, and that's an arrogant thing for me to say.
Without losing anybody.
Yeah, but it's super arrogant for me
Yeah.
to say, but we did it nonetheless. Right. Was it perfect? Absolutely not.
That's the soft mindset. Just go figure it out and then execute violently.
Yeah. And those guys were incredible, and they still are. They're incredible.
Yeah.
Just, I'll go figure it out. We're gonna stub our toes in the dark. Like, we are gonna bash in our shins and figure.
Right.
Like, we're gonna be broken and beat up at the end of this a little bit, but chances are I wouldn't bet against us.
Right.
Yeah, that's.
You get the mission accomplished. Might be cold, wet, miserable, and a little beat up, but you'll get it done.
Yeah. And Manchester's a great example of that
Yeah.
too. Like, none of us had built a roasting plant. We had the manufacturer as our partner in that, which obviously their information is somewhat skewed.
And vendors who want to take shortcuts on things like size of pipes.
Right. And then you got my dad digging in their ass on a regular basis.
Yeah.
I think that the challenges of the company, and I think challenges of companies, it's one thing that I will say is always really excited me about the company itself, and will continue to excite me and get me fired up, is like, man, the complex problems never cease to come across your plate.
That's the challenge. But just back to Amanda is a great example. Amanda Higgins, Air Force veteran, plant general manager, Manchester, Tennessee, startup operation, on her own journey of personal growth. Single mom, 2 daughters, just got her MBA in her part-time, and she's like, bring it on, give me more.
Right.
I mean, that's what's going to power this company.
Yep. No, I couldn't agree more. And the people that rise to those occasions, and they have a relationship with the company and the people in it. And just like any relationship, it ebbs and flows in its circumstance. But when you're married and you're committed to a process, like, that's the other piece to that, where, and I don't want to blame it on like the millennial generation, but I'll blame it on just individuals and the way that they look at things and how committed they are to maybe a process of self-exploration and personal growth. Because as we've seen in the 4 years, that we have great employees and those people that we've been able to support and put into those positions, they've got to have, and most of them do this curiosity level and then confidence level to know, I'm going to go figure that out.
Right.
And if I get stuck, guess what? I got a team of people that'll help me figure it out. And that's where hopefully I've been a good partner in that along the process.
And your expectation is they're going to take initiative.
Yeah.
If there are gaps that need to be filled in the commander's intent or the operations order, we'll go figure it out. Don't just say, I did what you asked me to do. That's what always drives me crazy. Right. Somebody comes back and says, I did what you asked me to do. No, you did only what I asked you to do. That's not what we're about. We want you to go figure it out. Do what we asked you to do, but do more, all in the service of the mission and the end user.
Well, I think that's where that soft mentality, and that's one of the things that we're really going to focus on this year is really focusing on the people that are, and when I say that, focusing on the company and the people that are really self-driven, that can take initiative, look for work, and then prioritize their work effectively. I look at it like a target, and I'm training and working on a lot of different areas around the world, and then executing targets. One of the things that I used to have these long, complex conversations and try to build into the atmosphere is you're hitting a target without external security, which is something that happens a lot. Even if you do have external security, you can't just execute the SOP because that becomes a dance. If there's an open door or an open window or there's something that needs attention, you have to be able to prioritize it along with executing the target and then understanding how big of a threat it is and then figuring out where that fits in to the entire evolution of the target. So it's funny because you can take kind of the lessons of CQB and you can apply them in business a lot, which is,
You might remind people what CQB
sorry,
is.
close quarters battle. You take those lessons in CQB and you can really apply those across the spectrum in business, because the best guys at CQB, they're always looking for work, and they understand how to prioritize threat and prioritize their and leverage their capabilities, whether it's physical or tactical capabilities, how to leverage all their assets, prioritize things, do split decision making, complex problem solving. It's all condensed down to like the frame of a target and in business.
And a target where you don't have complete information.
You might have an external look,
Right.
you might have a small intel packet, but then you execute it. And if you're executing it appropriately with the right SOP and good team members, statistically speaking, you're going to survive, right? Even if they're prepared and waiting, depending. So it's even in business, giving people opportunity to run through their own problems, build their own teams, build their own SOPs. Because there's a lot of things I think that have to be internally SOP'd. I really do from the top. But there's a lot of things within a department that you can standardize. Like there are a lot of things where I want you to come to the conclusion or the solution,
Right.
the way that you know how to come to that.
Right.
And hopefully you're going to come up with a better process than I was even envisioning.
Sure. We can all look at the same data, do our situation analysis, but you want the subordinate commanders, the other leaders in the company, to come up with their own ideas, their own plans, synchronize those, and get after it.
Yeah, because I think that's probably my own personal bias was the most fulfilling aspects of my previous profession was given the opportunity to put my own signature on the line. As an artisan of the craft, I could put my own signature on that. Now that's after repetition after repetition after repetition.
Sure.
You still have to have some type of institutional background and knowledge. But so, kind of the last thing I wanted to go over was, where do you see yourself within the company? We'll call it 3 to 5 years down the road. What do you see?
I think ultimately it gets to maybe that second point I mentioned at the outset around innovation and execution. So, it starts with mission and culture and helping people experience that journey of personal growth and service of the mission. And then for companies to continue to grow and serve their end users in the dynamic environment of business where people will copy what we do, competition will make some moves. We're going to have to innovate around product, how we go to market, how we enhance the value proposition to the end user. And a lot of the innovation ideas are just that. Until you routinize, put yourself in a position to execute really well and become kind of that execution machine of dialing in all the little details. Until we do that, then it's hard to get to that 1 million to 2 million subscribers.
Right.
So it's that combination of both innovating and then putting the systems and the people in place to execute. That gets pretty exciting because then it's the complex ballet done right.
The complex ballet done right. Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. Well, we're going to post your bio on the website so people can, if they want to learn more about Tom Davin, they can learn more about it. Do you have anything else you want to put out?
I would just say a takeaway, because this is launch code.
It is.
So if you're an entrepreneur out there, never underestimate the power of revisiting the mission all the time. And you talked a little bit about sometimes the fatigue, and you didn't say it this way, but you don't want to be that commander giving the commander's speech.
Right.
So nobody wants to hear the leader of the company get up there and just rote, memorize, and repeat the mission. That is boring as hell. But I think everybody has a lot of capacity to listen to stories about people who are living the mission of the company, building the culture. Even if you have a culture you don't like as a leader, there's 10 to 20% of the people out there today who are living that culture.
Right.
Heroize them, tell their story, talk about the Amanda Higgins in your organization. That sends a signal to everybody, oh, that's what the boss wants. That's what we're all about. I think that's a key takeaway from this conversation.
Oh, I would agree. And if you haven't seen Amanda Higgins, we did It's Who We Are for Amanda specifically. You can find that on Facebook or YouTube. Well, I'm looking forward to having you as a regular contributor. Basically, you're no longer a guest. You're part of the team, so you're gonna have to be a regular contributor. The funny thing is I was just thinking about this morning, which is I think with Launch Code, with you and your given background, we can start to go into dirt dive bigger topics, or dirty dirt. We can dirt dive some topics that we get questions all the time, and to be honest with you, I can't go into the details in some of these aspects where, we're going through something right now where we're selecting an ERP, for instance. That's a really complex conversation that requires a lot of different input. And I was talking to, I actually emailed Aubrey Marcus from On It the other day, and I asked him, I was like, hey, who'd you guys use, right? And that is and I realized, man, that is such an incredible gift to be able to have a network of people that you can reach out to and say, hey, what'd you guys use?
Right. And what'd you screw up that we can avoid screwing up?
Right. Yeah.
Those are the most valuable lessons.
And I think what would be really, really, really cool for us is to kind of rip through some of these aspects of business that people don't quite understand what they're getting into at times. Then you have all of your experience that we can couple in and maybe kind of network around and figure out like, wow, we should really have an ERP conversation with, Aubrey and another guy from business and go, what'd you guys learn along this process? Because there's going to be a ton of you guys that have to implement this.
Exactly. And it typically goes wrong in a number of ways.
Right. It'll bite you in the ass. Yeah. It really will. And I think of across the line, as far as all the things that we've seen in the last four years, just in Black Rifle, things that you've seen, we have an endless amount of content that we can put out. So I will say this, you guys have topics and you've direct messaged me specifically for those topics, but DM Launch Code and, ask questions. Bring it on. We're ready. Awesome. Thanks, Tom. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Evan.
See you, man.
Hoorah.